Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the important Angular interview questions, and I will also explain you each of the interview questions with the answers with the live examples, so you remember those things and even you can answer by your own. So a few of the questions might be technical, few of the questions might be just for the understanding. I would suggest you to watch the complete video so you get a good idea and you can clear the interview. Without delay, come let's dive in. So the first question is, what is Angular and how it differs from AngularJS? Angular is a modern TypeScript based framework for building of all the web applications. Okay, now this is completely rewritten from the AngularJS. There is no connectivity between the AngularJS and Angular, meaning if you know AngularJS, it is not the same as Angular. If you're just learning Angular and not AngularJS, that's absolutely fine. You don't need to know about the AngularJS. And AngularJS is called version 1, and after that when they rewrote everything in Angular, it is starting from version 2, and currently 16 is a stable version as of this recording. And that is what you need to know about this question. Now the next question is, can you explain the architecture of an Angular application? So the short answer is, the Angular application follows a component based architecture. It comprises of the components which encapsulates the template logic and the styles. Okay, so the data flow is unidirectional from parent component to the child component, and services are used for sharing the data and functionality between the components. So what is these things? Like, you should know, you should understand from the application perspective so that you can answer even by your own. So let's take a simplest component example. So this is a component, right? So component will have an HTML, a logic, which is the TS file, and then CSS will go here, and then the test file. So these three are the main thing: the CSS file, the HTML file, and the component file. Component file will have all the logics that is required for the component to show up the data. HTML will have pure HTML and then the data bindings according to that. And CSS will have the nice CSS that is required for the UI to look good. That's the three things. So component is having these three things, and then component is everything in Angular. Let's take an example of this one, right? This application, you see this, the top one, this is one component. The component has some logic, some input, and the one that you see below is another component, and these two are placed inside another component. So everything is component based. That's what it means. Now the next one is, what is Angular CLI and how it is beneficial for the Angular development? So Angular CLI is nothing but command line interface. So command line tool that simplifies the Angular development. It provides scaffolding, code generation, and build optimization. And this CLI makes the common development task and making it easier to create and manage the Angular application. So basically what it means is, through the command, if you go to the terminal and create a new terminal, you can actually create a component, service, module, everything using the command line tool. So ng generate component followed by the component name. If I type this, that's it. It will create a component called form, and that's how the form component will come and sit here, right? So basically, like, generate instead of component, you can say service, ng generate service followed by the service name. It's going to generate the service. So that is what the CLI is all about. So you can use the command that is provided by the Angular CLI, and you can actually auto generate the code. So the next one is, describe the components in Angular and their role in building web application. We already talked about the components, so let's talk about the short answer of this. Components are the fundamental building blocks in Angular. They encapsulate an application's view, data, and logic. Components promote reusability and maintainability by breaking the user interface into manageable and modular pieces. So like I explained already about the component, we already talked about the component, right? So the component is a combination of HTML and the logic and the CSS. And this one will separate a piece of, the HTML from your whole web application. This makes it easier for you to build quickly about a section, and then you can reuse the components in so many places. I can reuse the same component here, which is here in the home page as well. See, twice I've reused. I've reused there, I've reused here, like that. So you can reuse the components, but basically components mean we'll have a CSS, we have an HTML, and then we'll have a logic. So if we go inside the logic, all the data will be combined here. That's how the logic will come here. So these three together is called a component. Now the next one is, what is data binding in Angular and how does it work? This is important. So basically, let's understand the short answer. Data binding in Angular establishes a connection between the component and the view. So the HTML and the CS file. It allows automatic synchronization of data between the component and the template. And there are three types of bindings: one-way binding, which is also called interpolation, or property binding; two-way binding, which is used by ng model; and then the last one is the even binding. So let's take an example of these three things. So if you take a look at example of the one-way binding, so you inside the CS class you have a variable called message, and you can type something here. So this message is the variable that you can use it in the HTML here, and in order to use that, you just need to use double curly bracket. When you do that, message is a variable which is inside this logic, which will be evaluated by the Angular, and then it will replace this characters, this thing inside this. That's how it works. Let's take another example. So let's take an example. So in this one, if you see, I have a variable called heading title here, and I have something written here, right? Search restaurant. Now I can use this variable directly in the HTML like this. If I use like this, if I use like this heading title will be evaluated, and then the content of this heading title will be replaced inside the h2 tag, and this is called one-way binding. Okay, so and this is also called interpolation. Double curly brace inside that, if you put any valid variable, that will evaluate, and that's called interpolation. And then that's called one-way binding. And then another example of one-way binding is you use the same thing to put inside any of the property of the element. So h2 has a property called inner text, and if you just put inside the square bracket and then use this like this value will be evaluated and put into the inner text. So this is called property binding. Okay, so one-way binding, both are one-way binding. This is interpolation, this is called property binding. Now the next part that we saw was the two-way binding. So if you see something here, right, there's an input and we are trying to ask to enter the email address. So you assign a variable inside an ng model. So you decorate ng model with a variable like this: square bracket, parenthesis, close the parenthesis, square bracket. So what will happen is, initially this user email ID will be, for example, empty. So the input will have empty, and the moment you start typing in the input box, this variable will start getting what you typed. Once you know what you typed, you can actually use this variable here somewhere for your logic. So here itself we have used the logic. If you look at this, see, we can use that directly into the logic. So that's called two-way binding. Now the last part, the third part, is the event binding. Event means for a given HTML element, click, double click, mouse over, all of those are called events. Event binding means you're binding a function to an event. It could be click, double click, mouse over, mouse out, mouse move, anything. Okay, the logic that you need to understand is it should be within the parenthesis. Now anything that you mark within parenthesis, and if it is a valid one, that's called event, and then you're binding it to a function. So what will happen in this case, when someone clicks on this button, we are saying when someone clicks on the button, call this function. And what this function will do, it will do some work, right? It is going to do some work. That's it. That is what you need to understand. So the next question is, how do you create a custom directive in Angular and what are its use cases? So basically, let's understand what is custom directive. Custom directive in Angular are created using @directive decorator. Okay, so this is a decorator. They extend HTML element with custom behavior. So the use case could include creating a reusable UI component, enhancing the accessibility, and adding application specific behavior to the element. Now, if I talk like this, you may not understand. So let's dive into the example. So consider this example. So in this, you see this @directive, that is called decorator. This one you're decorating, and then you're saying selector as app highlight. Okay, you need to specify this one, and then you're marking this above a class, and class could be anything. So let's have a meaningful name called highlight directive. So in this, what you have to do in the constructor, you're just you're injecting the element reference, and then wherever this app insight is used, app highlight is used, we are marking that element's background color as yellow. Okay, so let me give another example. So in this case, it's the same thing. So one directive, but for different event, we are firing a different colors. How do you use this in the code? So you use like this in the code. You use this app highlight that we marked as the select app. So you just need to use the bracket and then app highlight. The moment you put this, the directive will come into picture, and then we are passing a data here, like the light blue. That's the color. So the light blue color will be automatically highlighted for this div. That's how the directive works. Okay, the next one is explain Angular module system and its significance in its application. So the short answer is Angular uses modules to organize the code into the functional unit. Modules encapsulates components, services, and other application features. So they can also help manage dependency, enabling the lazy loading and improve the code maintainability. So now let's understand in the code perspective what is module. So for a given Angular application, there will be at least one module. The module that is very common and everybody can easily recognize is something called app module. The moment you create an Angular application, there is something called app module. So this is what module is. So basically we are saying there's a class, and then this class we are decorating as module. So when you decorate as module, you need to have a decorator called @ng module. And inside that, there are plenty of things that you can do. There is something called declaration. So declaration will have all the components, and then there's something called imports. Imports means similar to how we have a module, there are many inbuilt module. You're importing many modules into this module. Okay, and then it can have providers where we configure the services, pipes, and all those things. And then it can also have the bootstrap to tell which component will be bootstrapped for this module. So this is what a module is. A module will have components, services, and importing other modules also. Alright, the next one is what are decorators in Angular and how are they used? Now this is very important. You should know basically what is decorator is. So decorator in Angular are functional and that modifies the JavaScript classes. They provide metadata that informs the Angular about how to use a class. Common decorators that in a day-to-day that you use for Angular application is the component, ng module, the injectable, and all those things. So let's take a look at what they meant. So there is always a class, right? Any class will always have a decorator. So if you use decorator like ng module, it will become a module. And then for component, if you go to any component will have a decorator called @component. So that's called decorator. So basically, they're all classes only, but we are telling this class will behave as a component. The moment you put the decorator called component, then the respective selectors and other stuff which is related to the component will come. Like how we saw in ng module. ng module will have the component imports, declarations, bootstrap, and all those things. Similar to that, component will have these things. Now let's consider about a service. Any service, again, it's basically a class, but you decorate with something called injectable. Injectable means this service can be used as an injectable service in any of the classes or the component or the services. You can inject this anywhere else. Okay, so this one will have something specific called provided in. When you say root, the service will be provided at the root. That's what it is. So let's focus on the topic. Decorator means any class that you decorate will tell the Angular how the class should behave. So decorator means you should understand these are all called decorators. Injectable, ng module, component, all those things are common one. Even directive, that is also called decorator. Alright, the next one is describe the difference between Angular template and Angular literals. So basically, the short answer you can see from the screen, it says Angular templates are HTML views with Angular specific syntax for data binding and logic, whereas the template literals are a JavaScript feature for the string interpolation. I will explain you in a bit. So Angular templates are used for rendering the dynamic content, while template literals are used for the constructing strings in the JavaScript. What does that mean? So if you consider any component, right? Let's consider some valid component. So if you consider this component, anything that you do here to show some data, to use the variables here, they're all called templates. The whole stuff is called template. It's all dynamic based on what this variable will have. However, string literals means, let's say you have a string like this. So string literals means, let's say you have a variable or anything inside this logic, okay? You're using this tick symbol. This is tick symbol. This is not single quotes. It's a tick symbol, okay? You use the tick symbol front and back, and then you use the dollar symbol and single curly bracket. And then inside that, any variable or anything that can be evaluated can be used. So in this case, I'm using the first line value and its description. Now these two will be evaluated and will become a string. That string will be put into this string. This variable, if you use, it will be evaluation of these. So this is called string literals, and then whatever you see in the HTML is called templates. Okay, so we should not get confused. These are the difference. Now the next question is, how does dependency injection works in Angular and why it is important? Let's take a look at the short answer. Dependency injection in Angular provides services and dependencies to the component and the services. It prompts reusability, testability, and modularity by decoupling the component from their dependencies and making code more maintainable. So let's take a look at the example of the code. So we have something called services here. Okay, so let's open up the service. For example, spinner service, or let's say, okay. So let's say we have something called reservation service. So this reservation service is nothing but a class, but it is decorated with something called injectable. Okay, so now this class will become an injectable services that you can inject into any other component or services. Now what this is doing, this is encapsulating the HTTP request and it is calling some web API. Now how do you use this? This services, if you want to use, let me see where it is used. You see this, it is used in so many places. So let's go to the place that we want. So here, this is a component, right? So in the component, in the constructor, we can actually request for the service to be injected by the Angular. How the Angular will know? The moment it sees this, it will go and see, okay, this is provided at the root, which means anyone under the ng module, right? Any component, any module can access the service. So we provide that here in the constructor. Now when this component is loaded, Angular will make sure it will give an instance of this one into this component. It's a instance, it's not the same instance, it's instance, right? So that instance you can use and call the methods inside the services. So this way you can use this one in this component, in other component, anywhere else. So this is how the dependency injection works, and this is just a simple example. This goes for like other similar services or even for the pipes. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. This is just part 1 and we will continue on part 2 with different important questions that have been asked in interviews. And if you like this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more videos. And if you have any questions to this, provide in the comment section. If you have come across any of these questions, do let me know in the comment section so it will be beneficial for other users as well. So prepare well and don't forget to watch the next video, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more tech tutorials. And don't forget to hit the bell icon to get notified when we post new videos. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave them in the comments below. Happy coding!